I really don't care what happens to her at all. I don't care. Like, everybody they tiptoe around with this social media, but what y'all don't get is that it be real consequence for y'all little flexes, y'all quick flexes for $300 that you need. It be consequence.
The courtroom was quiet, far too quiet for what everyone expected to be just another legal back and forth between Teyana Taylor and Aaron Pierre. The air was thick with tension, but no one could have guessed that by the end of the day, the entire room would be spinning from a revelation so intense, so personal, that even the judge struggled to maintain order. People had shown up expecting a simple hearing about parenting schedules or maybe a heated dispute over social media boundaries, but what they got instead was a raw, emotional explosion that left everyone speechless and left Aaron completely frozen. From the moment Teyana stepped into the room, it was clear something wasn't right. Her usual calm, collected demeanor was replaced with something more fragile, like she was holding back a storm. She didn't say a word to anyone. Not to her attorney, not to the reporters waiting outside, not even to Amon Shumpert, who had quietly taken a seat in the back row of the courtroom, arms folded tightly across his chest, his jaw clenched like he knew something was coming. Aaron walked in a few minutes later, head held high, dressed in a tailored suit, projecting the image of a man unbothered. He smiled politely at his lawyer, nodded slightly toward the judge, and then gave a brief glance in Teyana's direction. She didn't look back. She didn't even blink. And that's when the first whisper began, just faint murmurs in the gallery. People felt it in the air. Something was about to go terribly wrong. The hearing started like any other. Formalities. Names entered into record. The judge, a seasoned woman with little patience for celebrity theatrics, reminded everyone that this was not a spectacle but a serious legal proceeding. Still, the cameras outside were rolling. The paparazzi were perched outside like vultures, and inside, every breath felt like it was being recorded by someone. Aaron's lawyer was the first to speak, painting a picture of his client as cooperative, peaceful, and simply interested in fairness. Mr. Pierre, he said confidently, has remained respectful throughout this ordeal. Despite being dragged into the spotlight by Ms. Taylor's public lifestyle, he has maintained his dignity and refrained from engaging in any inflammatory behavior. He talked about Aaron's positive influence, his dedication to his work, and how he'd simply been trying to maintain a healthy relationship with Teyana while respecting boundaries. Teyana didn't flinch. She just listened, jaw tight, eyes fixed forward, like she'd trained herself not to react. But if you looked close enough, you could see the way her hands were trembling in her lap. She was holding something in. Something heavy. When it was her turn, her lawyer stood up, but before he could even say a word, Teyana reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm. She stood up slowly, taking a deep breath as she walked toward the stand. The judge looked slightly surprised, but didn't stop her. Teyana cleared her throat. "I want to speak," she said softly, her voice almost breaking. The room stilled. Even Aaron looked up now, alert. For the first time, his calm started to crack just a little. She began with measured words. She talked about what it was like being a public figure and a mother. She shared how difficult it had been to navigate a complicated emotional triangle while being under scrutiny. "This hasn't been about me trying to ruin anyone's life," she said. "It's been about me trying to hold mine together." Her voice shook again, but she didn't stop. "I've had to protect my daughter. I've had to protect myself. And I've had to stay silent even when I wanted to scream." Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Then she paused. The silence was unbearable. "I didn't want to do this here," she said, looking down. "But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending nothing happened." She looked up, directly at Aaron now. "I'm pregnant." A wave of gasps echoed through the courtroom. The judge's gavel hit the bench once, then twice, calling for silence, but the damage was already done. People whispered loudly, phones were suddenly buzzing in people's pockets. Even Amon, seated in the back, sat up straighter, his eyes wide with disbelief. Aaron didn't move. He stared at her like his brain couldn't process the words. Teyana didn't stop. Her voice cracked but remained steady enough. And it's Aaron's. That was it. The room lost control. The whispers turned into audible outrage. Some were shocked. Others just looked heartbroken. Aaron's lawyer tried to get his attention, but Aaron remained motionless, lips slightly parted, a look of complete horror spreading across his face. Teyana's lawyer stepped in, trying to regain structure, but the judge had to bang her gavel again, warning that any further outbursts would lead to people being removed from the courtroom. Amon didn't say a word. He just stood up, shook his head slowly, and walked out, his face hard, unreadable. Cameras caught him as soon as he pushed the courtroom doors open, flashes lighting up like fireworks. But inside, the real fireworks had just started. Aaron finally spoke. Why now? Why here? His voice was barely audible, but it cracked at the edges. Teyana stared at him, her eyes burning. Because I protected you long enough. I kept quiet when I didn't have to. I lied to people for you. I let people think I was the problem, the messy one, the dramatic one. But I'm done carrying the shame for something you helped create. Her lawyer opened a folder and handed the judge several printed pages. Your Honor, he said, these are messages from Mr. Pierre to my client, including text messages and voice notes. Aaron's face turned white. His hands twitched slightly as his lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. The judge reviewed the materials silently. A few pages in, her expression shifted from neutral to stern. She looked up slowly and adjusted her glasses. Mr. Pierre, she said, these messages appear to suggest you were aware of Ms. Taylor's condition and asked her to withhold the information. Is that correct? Aaron didn't respond immediately. Then he mumbled, it wasn't like that. Teyana cut in. Yes, it was. You begged me to keep quiet. Said it would ruin your career. Said it would mess everything up. You told me we'd deal with it privately. And like a fool, I believed you. Aaron's face twisted. I didn't ask for this to happen. Teyana's voice cut through the courtroom like shattered glass. Sharp, unflinching. Neither did I. The judge immediately raised a hand, her tone firm, and waited. That's enough. We're not here to litigate emotions. But these new facts significantly alter the context of this hearing. I'll need time to review everything before determining the next steps. A chill swept through the room. You could feel the shift. This was no longer just a messy scandal playing out in whispers and rumors. It had turned into something bigger, something binding. Legal. Permanent. Teyana lowered herself back into her seat, slow and unsteady, as though the months of holding it all and had finally caught up with her. It was less like sitting and more like collapsing. Her mother rushed to her side, gripping her hand tightly, trying to anchor her through the storm. Aaron remained still, his expression unreadable, almost frozen in place. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. In that silence, everything screamed his fear, his shame, and the stark realization that the image he had so carefully crafted had just shattered in front of everyone. Outside the courthouse, chaos erupted. Media vans lined the street, headlines firing off in real time. Teyana pregnant with Aaron's baby, courtroom shock, Aaron Pierre exposed. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips, commentary, outrage, heartbreak. But inside the courtroom, none of that noise mattered. Inside, everything was still. The silence hung in the air like smoke after a fire, thick, bitter, and impossible to ignore. The judge called for a recess, her expression still etched with concern as she rose from the bench. This court will reconvene following further review of the submitted evidence, she said firmly. Until then, I strongly advise both parties to refrain from making any public statements. But the warning came too late. The damage had already been done. The truth, or at least pieces of it, had been laid bare, and there was no reeling it back in. Teyana stood slowly, as if carrying the weight of every word spoken in that courtroom. She turned, casting one final glance toward Aaron. but he didn't meet her eyes. He couldn't. That single look held too much, too many memories, too many lies, too much pain. For Aaron, it was like staring into a mirror and watching all the things he had tried so desperately to hide come roaring back into the light. Every truth denied, every moment buried, now exposed. Outside, Iman was already gone. No press, no comments, just the sound of distant cameras clicking and unanswered questions hanging in the air. He left like a man who knew too well that sometimes silence speaks louder than any prepared statement. Teyana followed not long after, walking past the swarm of media without so much as a glance. No tears, no trembling voice, just a steady, haunting calm, the kind that comes when you've finally said what needed to be said, even if it cost you everything. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from survival. Aaron emerged nearly 10 minutes later, flanked by his attorney and a wall of security. He looked hollow, like the weight of the last hour had aged him a decade. Reporters shouted his name, cameras flashed in his face. But he didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He didn't even seem present. Just frozen, caught somewhere between shame, fear, and the crushing realization of what he'd lost. Because when the truth finally explodes in public, when the lies can't hold anymore, there's no going back. And for Aaron, this was the day everything fell apart. The day the courtroom erupted. The day Teyana stood up, spoke her truth, and shattered everything he thought he had under control.